A billion trees in witness stand watch over ever-changing land. In summer's blaze with leaves of green, those within may pass unseen. But autumn comes with fall of leaf, no canopy hides what lies beneath. Greetings, my tender lumplings. This is the Autumn Witch, aka the Sister of Prattle, with my first video for Bleeding Tree Gaming. I shall start by showing you how to build a table's worth of gaming terrain around the theme of a desolate, haunted forest. This video will show you how I made these pieces of terrain, and my next video will show you how I paint and finish them. Before I start, I would like to just ask you to hit the like and subscribe icons if you like what you see and want to see more. Right, let's crack on. I ordered a pack of chipboard from Amazon. These will form the bases onto which everything will go, and I made sure to cut them larger than the scenery I was going to put them on, so we get a more natural looking gradient to the flat surface when we add the modelling compound. When doing this, it is important to remember that straight lines very seldomly appear in nature, and so try to avoid this when cutting out the chipboard bases and when carving polystyrene landforms. I chose to buy myself a cheap hot wire set for dealing with the polystyrene. You can easily use a hot knife or hobby blade, but I feel the hot wire cutters to be quicker, tidier and more precise. Although wearing some form of mask is important, as the fumes can be quite toxic. I am wearing a mask here, and you cannot prove otherwise. To stick them down, I am using Geek Gaming Scenics fast drying basing glue. Now this stuff is tackier than a wedding reception in a Wetherspoons, so anywhere it has oozed out into the open remains tacky. However, it dries super quick like it says it does, which is great, and future steps will cover any seepage. That is probably not a sentence to be taken out of context. You should probably have plenty of paper towels handy in case it drips, which, now that I think of it, is also a comment that shouldn't be taken out of context. Now, as for the trees, well, what looks like a tree more than an actual tree? I grabbed a selection of fallen twigs from our garden, or you can just go to a park, or whatever if you don't have a garden, and these twigs get to be trees, so, you know, good for them. You can see that I am making sure there are flat spaces on the bases, I rhymed, and polystyrene landforms. Whilst this isn't as realistic as it could be, these are gaming pieces, and miniatures are going to need to be able to pass into or through them during the course of a game. Along with the polystyrene, I'm also using some granite stones. I bought a huge bag of them years ago from the garden department at the range, and they've just been sitting about doing nothing. Well, like me. It is very easy to go overboard and make terrain that is crazy heavy, and a lot of terrain builders prefer to use plaster rocks. However, given the thinness of the chipboard, strategically placing the rocks will greatly improve integrity, reduce warping, and given their size and flat nature, they also add spots where an infantry model can stand. I've decided that in the forest shall be the remains of some old buildings. I have a lot of the older 40k ruined city terrain pieces, and they suit my ultramarines perfectly, but now I am painting up my martyred lady sisters, and I want some scenery to suit them. So I decided that this forest has sprung up on a long, derelict shrine world, bursting through the ruins whilst also keeping it generic enough that any number of different game systems can use it. Now that everything is dry and has adhered properly, it is time to make the ground look more natural. I have a 1 kilo bag of Geek Gaming Scenics modelling compound, and with this I shall slap it on the bases and get into all those cracks. This is my first time using this product, but it's pretty easy to use. It works to a mixture of 3 parts compound to 1 part water. Everyone says the ideal consistency is that of cottage cheese. I have a confession to make. I have never eaten cottage cheese. I would say that the consistency is more like shredded paper and plaster mixed with water. I built it up against the base of the trees, giving them some extra stability, and to make sure to get into the gaps between the stones, and with some very wet fingers made sure it got in between the bricks on the bases that had them. You will notice that I have 2 large buildings, One was the result of me testing out a cathedral casting kit from Green Stuff World. It's really good. And the other was a curiosity I ordered from Ender's Toys, namely a graveyard set with a mausoleum, 2 statues, and a load of tombstones. It's all FDM printed, but it looks pretty decent. The layer lines are a little visible, but they shouldn't be too obvious when it's, finished and painted. Whilst I use the statues on this piece as well, I am saving the gravestones for something else. I don't know what yet, but I'm sure it'll be great. Also, there are 2 pieces where I decided to have ponds, because I like to make things easy on myself. Here I made sure to keep the banks as solid as possible for, spoiler alert, the resin pour that'll be coming next time. Now, here again we see the conflict between realism and playability, where the water is clearly going to be above ground level, but hopefully it won't be too jarring. These 2 ponds are really the only impassable terrain in this project, which just adds another playability feature. Now, it took me a couple of hours in total, and I used a whole kilo of the modelling compound to do these 12 or so pieces, but I was being very liberal with it. 1 kilo, it seemed to go a long way, and if you get it from Geek Gaming Scenic's website, it costs about a tenner, or 10 British pounds, which is pretty good for a kilo. As for the drying time, it's pretty quick. Granted, I filmed this footage on the hottest day ever in the UK, under studio lights with a strong fan on, which no doubt assisted the process, but I made sure to make it up in small batches so I didn't have an issue with it drying out as I was still working with it. Now, we have the basic landscapes built, and I'm pretty happy with them, but forest floors are covered with detritus. What this needs is some rotten, mushy vegetation where years' worth of fallen leaves have landed and decayed. When rummaging through my cupboards, I found a decent amount of expired herbs. One of my go-to terrain channels was Bardscraft, which was dedicated to super low-budget terrain, and one of their go-to flocking options was using herbs. Sadly, they haven't posted anything new for a time, but there's still plenty of cool stuff on there, and it really is worth checking out to know where you can, cut some corners. I didn't want to just cover the whole base in flock. Instead, I focused it where I felt dead leaves would naturally gather. I played about with how to actually get the damn stuff to stay put, but quickly decided it would be best to water down some PVA glue and apply it to heaps of herbs or leaves with a pipette. At first the herbs didn't take the glue too well, but then I remembered there was such a thing as water tension, and so I added a drop of washing up liquid, or dish soap, whatever you call it, to the mix and was soon squirting all over the flocking with reckless abandon. The herbs do have a scent to them, which I am sure will be mitigated by the next step, but try not to eat your terrain. You'll hurt yourself on the rocks for a start. And here we come to tying it all together. I mix up a batch of water, PVA glue, black poster paint, and a little more dish soap, and get slathering. This should seal in the scent of the herbs, give an extra layer of protection to the more fragile parts of the pieces, get everything nicely primed. After that, I went back over them, looking for areas that I'd missed the first time, or places where the paint had run away from. And now we get to go on to the quickest part of the entire project, rattle cans! I bribed Azure Witch to do this, as it involves going outside and I can't cope with sunlight. They came in with a grey primer first. If you're doing this, don't bother to use any of your expensive primers. Cheap and plentiful is best for this sort of thing. In fact, I tend to use automotive primers on my minis as well, and they come out really good. You need to get in there from the sides, leaving the deepest recesses with the black. And once that's done, get a top-down blast white. So we come to the end of part 1 of this project. We are past the messy stuff and poised to take it up a notch to scenery one can be proud of. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Give that bell icon a cheeky boop to make sure you get notified when the next video is out. I shall now leave you with some cool footage of the primed pieces. Catch you next time.